I feel like these past few days have really entered into like winter and holiday season, and I feel like I'm finally becoming one of those people that's like, yay, I get to put on sweatshirts. Because before I was like, I don't want to put on a sweatshirt. I want to be out in a tank top with the sun out. But I think all the lights I love. I like to call them winter lights for two reasons. One, because I'm Jewish. But number two, the more important reason is because if you call them Christmas lights, then you have to take them down after Christmas. And personally, I feel like winter lights should go up through winter. So I will have mine up through March. And now that we have ours up, and if you haven't seen, if you don't follow me on social media, my massively obnoxious Hanukkah unicorn inflatable, like it makes me so happy when I come home. So I hope everyone else is finding some way to bring joy into their holiday season, into moving into this end of year time, which can be a really big time of reflection. It's such an odd time, right? There's so much often up about family and gathering and connection, which can feel very different for different people depending on where you are with all that. And there's this time of, oh my goodness, it's going to be the new year, looking forward, and also making space for that reflection and stepping back time, which I think can be so tough with often what ends up being a very busy time of year. So I'm just going to leave that there because that's actually not what we're going to be talking about today, but that just came out. So I recently was on a chronic pain summit, one of those events where there's like 15 different speakers and it's kind of this fire hosing of information. And from that summit, I offered a really awesome opportunity for people to hop on a call with me to really decode their pain and understand how to up-level their life, really take the next step. And by the way, I would love to open that up to everyone on the podcast as well. So there will be a link in the show notes there. So I've really had this unique opportunity of getting to meet with a lot of people in a really short period of time, and from people who have just received such a massive amount of information. There were so many different speakers, and I will admit that I have not listened to any of the other talks, but they were all centered around chronic pain healing. And just from kind of glancing over the names and the topics, it was clear that, people were really coming from very different perspectives, which is amazing to have such a wide range of people to listen to. But what I noticed is there has been this thread that has run deep with every person I have spoken to who came from the summit. And it's this, oh my goodness, there's so much information. How do I know which thing to do? Like you say one thing, someone else is talking about something else, someone else is talking about something else. People are contradicting each other. And there has been this confusion that has come out of it. And I want to speak to this piece and then really bring it into a bigger topic of really choosing the right tool at the right time as well. Because as the internet has, exploded, obviously there's been internet for a long time, really, but if we think about it, like just take for a minute to appreciate the explosion of information we have had as a society. I'm going to guess if you're listening, right, you still have some recollection of the time, unless you are, I guess, a lot younger than me, of where like internet was dial-up and it was really slow and like there were websites on like Angel Fire or whatever and it was like not reliable at all. And you still had to go to the library to look up a lot of information. And now it's like available everywhere at like literally the touch of our fingertips. We don't even have to type anything in, right? We can just ask Google now with your voice. Like it is insane. And I think we forget, at least I do, how new and recent that is. And so our systems are really not equipped to take in that much information in such a short period of time. And I just really want to put that out there. It's not saying it's good or bad or right or wrong. It's just saying like, look at like the history of mankind, and never before has there been this much access to so much information. It just didn't exist. And with that, I also want to bring in is likely as you've looked back on how information has served you, it's likely served you really well. Like throughout your schooling, right? Knowledge was power. You knew the right information, you got the good grade, you moved on, right? There's this really reinforcing benefit to having the right information. And right? I mean, that makes sense. That's a good thing, hopefully, right? So noticing that of course exists. And information is really becoming such like this double-edged sword. I actually have no idea if I'm using that phrase correctly. You can tell me later. I am so loving, and I know have benefited extremely from the abundance of information and being able to advocate for myself and being able to research information when, after my concussion, doctors were telling me there was nothing I could do. And I have used it in so many ways that have benefited me. And I love when often many of my colleagues, when I was in the physical therapy clinic, would kind of get upset when clients were coming in and being like, hey, I read this on the internet and, what's that? And to me, I always loved it. I always really appreciated when someone took the time to go out, read about stuff, advocate for themselves, read about the diagnosis they got, for instance, things like that. And what I will say is I have noticed a shift. And there is now so much information that there is a tipping point that gets reached. And there is diminishing benefits. Because I am a hard believer that knowledge is power and that access to information and education is absolutely essential. However, there's always going to be paradox to this. Too much information can be problematic. And this is what I'm really starting to see a lot of. And this has been a pattern, and this is what I want to speak about on this podcast. At the end of the day, no amount of knowledge will equal transformation, will equal change, will even equal learning something that you're aiming to learn, or being able to implement it in practice might be a better way to say it. As one of my mentors uses this example all the time, you can read all the books on how to ride a bike, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to actually get on the bike and learn to ride it, crashes and all. And the pattern I was really seeing out of this summit, and that I've been seeing for, probably the past 2 years or so, is that with this knowledge, there is a tipping point where knowledge without aligned action, and maybe we'll say it, let's get even more specific about knowledge about healing, even about the body, without aligned action that is right for the person's nervous system, is actually creating more layers of distrust, disharmony, and confusion with self and with the body. It actually is becoming a barrier to healing, not enhancing it. Information gathering in itself is becoming a protective pattern and mechanism versus being something to aid in the process. And it is being able to hold the nuance that this is not saying gaining knowledge is problematic or wrong or bad, or that you've done something wrong, if that you're someone who's like that, because hello, me too. I love information. I love gaining new knowledge, and so do all of my clients. It is just being able to notice when is it serving you versus when is it actually leading to procrastination or distrust in your own system or doubting self or what you know to be true. I tend to attract very highly intelligent, analytical, resourceful clients. And I like to think that I am one of those as well. Maybe not always so intelligent, but I try. And I think when you're in that, when you've been living in this place where being in your head and being really intelligent and getting all the good grades and, being the top of your class and being able to figure things out has served you so well, it becomes this really safe place to remain. Because really, take a moment to just come into appreciation for how much knowledge has served you up until this point. Think about the advantages you have gained. Think about where you are today because you've been able to use knowledge to accelerate that, to amplify that. Right? Probably a lot. And hell yes, celebrate that. That's amazing. There is nothing that has gone wrong with that or nothing that is wrong with that. It is now noticing that because that we've had that pattern ingrained in our system of, hey, knowledge gets us places. Where now is that actually getting in the way of you doing what really needs to be done in the name of healing? Where are you now stuck on a never-ending search for the right, I'm putting this in quotes, piece of information that will get you to the next step? Right? Where are you searching for this piece of missing information that is going to solve all of your problems? And are you even willing to admit that you are engaged in that pattern? Because if so, oh my goodness, am I celebrating the heck out of you? Because willing to see it of oh shit, yep, I've been searching for the right thing is the first step. So there is no shame, no judgment. You are in good company, and being willing to see it. And then because now you're seeing it and realizing that it might not be as helpful as you may have thought, you then get to shift it. But first, I want to speak to why it's not helpful to keep gaining information. And also, one of the biggest things that I've really, again, came up a lot in the summit is it's not about the right or wrong information. It is about what information are you using when. So I'm going to step back. I'm going to give a little bit of a story that happened to me recently just to help illustrate this. So my bathroom sink, ever since we bought our house, it would just leak from the base of it. It would just leak from the base of it. And we have one of those so my bathroom sink in our master bath is one of those where it's inlaid in that old school, probably from the 80s, vinyl, whatever. Okay. And so it would leak from the thing. And because it's this inlay, it would just collect and pool around the edge of the sink. And it was just super annoying because it's it was always a good amount, soak a towel. And I was what do I do with this dirty towel? Whatever. So I kind of just got sick of wiping it down, and then I would let it sit, and then it would get all gross and nasty. And then eventually I'd have to clean it. Yeah. Anyway, so here's this pattern of me ignoring it and then getting gross enough for me to wipe down every week or two and then repeat over and over and over again. And this management worked for about a year or so. And then I happened to have a plumber in my house. So I was hey, can you please fix this? And he investigated and was yeah, no, something's wrong with the base thing. The whole thing needs to be replaced. And he's it's at least a $250 fix. But since we have a double vanity, there was no way I was just replacing one of them. So now you're talking about $500, right? And I also was unwilling to put the same one back in because it's that ugly plastic, ugh. Anyways, I absolutely love my house so much. And I will be ready for a bathroom renovation when it comes time because it is, it was built in the late 80s and 90s and has not been updated since. So, but everything is functional right now. So anyways, I just kept ignoring it. I was it was not a problem enough for me to address it, right? Many things are in life, and that's okay. And actually, I'm going to take a side tangent on that in itself of we do not need to fix everything all at once. All right, sometimes there are areas in our life where we can be aware of yeah, at some point I might need to address that. And is it really a priority? I have one for me right now, and I probably had it for the past 2 years because I keep putting it off, but it might be becoming more and more, okay, Andrew, you might need to look at this, is how much coffee I drink, right? It's just in the stuff that I have been working with and addressing, I could not make it a priority. Maybe I'm getting close to it. And so I just want to allow yourself to have those things too, where you're yeah, you know what? At one day I do need to look at how many vegetables I'm eating, or how much nature time I'm getting, or how much family time I'm getting, or how much time I'm spending on my phone or watching Netflix. There might be all kinds of habits. There's always at any given time so many habits we can shift, and you get to prioritize them. You get to define what is actually important to you and available to shift with the resources you have, okay? So For me, the sink was not a priority. However, the hardware store by me happened to be having a massive going out of business sale, and for less than $50, I ended up getting 2 brand new faucets. And in the typical fashion that I tend to approach things, which is don't read instructions, take shit apart, and make a big mess and then try to fix it, I just watched some YouTube videos and I kind of went from there. And I got the handle part, the part that was the leaking part. I got it done. It was actually incredibly easy. I was like, wow, why was I thinking I had to pay a plumber to do this? I just was able to do it myself. So that part, piece of cake. Which, another side tangent here, how many times do we feel like we have to outsource responsibility for something that we truly can just do ourselves when we just take the little time to believe in ourselves and put into place something maybe that we have learned? I know I do this a lot, and I'm very aware of this pattern, so it's one I'm able to catch. And it was one around this that, it's why I bought them. And I was like, I'm pretty good when I watch a YouTube video figuring things out. Like, why am I thinking a plumber needs to be the one who does this? In worst case scenario, the plumber has to come fix my mess if I make one, right? Like, I don't want that, but that's kind of the worst case here. So anyways, got the handle part done really easily, but what I failed to realize, the drain part was a whole different ballgame. And if people are really good at this stuff, you can laugh at me. Like, I've never taken apart a sink before, okay? And when I got to the videos on that part, I kind of freaked out. I was like, oh shit, this is like way more complicated than I anticipated. But I had already started, and I kind of couldn't just do it half-assed now, so I just had really no choice but to keep going. And so here is one of the pieces I want to really touch into, and I want you to really notice when you are researching, is had I taken the time to watch these videos ahead of time, right? Had maybe when the plumber given me the quote and I had a thought of like, ooh, I could do this myself. Let me go research to see if that's possible. I'm pretty sure that had I watched those, I would have been like, oh, nope, can't do that. And then I just would have never bought the faucets in the first place. It probably would have freaked me out a little bit. And especially because it was not a high priority also. I likely would not have taken the chance, right? Taking the leap into this thing. So in this scenario, not having the information, not knowing all the next steps was a massive benefit that worked to my advantage because I had no choice at that point but to fix the mess I made, right? I didn't really, I guess I could have chosen, but like at that point, it's like I was already invested in there, right? I was already like in on this and determined. And it worked out to not know all of the steps. And what I'm seeing now and what I was really gathering from these consults was that as more and more information is becoming so readily available, is that people are really seeing the steps way further ahead than they need to, and then that is advantageous. So often what I'm seeing is people are anticipating the steps they're going to need to take down the road, and because they are not ready for those steps, that's not where they're at with their journey, they are either, or both in some cases, becoming paralyzed at the anticipation of needing to do something or do something that is, about healing. Like, I'm going to give like a silly example. This does not need to actually be what's required for healing at all. But let's say someone is watching a video that's talking about the benefits of meditation, and it's saying, hey, like meditating for 20 minutes is what's required to get into this certain wave state. For somebody who cannot even sit with themselves for a minute comfortably, that's going to freak them out. It's like, oh my God, that's too much, right? And it can paralyze them and be like, I can't do that. And then you go into shame and I'm a failure. And it's like, what's the point of even trying? Versus when you really meet someone where you are and like, hey, let's do this for 10 seconds first, then they can slowly work up to the steps And maybe, yeah, for that certain person, the 20-minute meditation, again, this is a very arbitrary example. By no means do I think a 20-minute meditation is necessary in healing. But it's just an easy one to wrap your head around. Maybe they eventually get there, and when it comes time for that step, it just is like the next step that is very tangible and they can step into with an ease because they have been prepping there, because they have been guided there over time. But what's happening with this information and this like kind of presentation of like, here's what you got to do, is it's putting too many steps out there too fast, or it's meeting people like at the wrong place in their journey. That same video talking about it, and this is a totally made up video, by the way, might meet somebody else who already has a meditation practice and already feels very successful at it. And so for them, maybe it provides this one tweak that is like, oh my God, that was like the magical next step because it worked for where they were. So I want to bring attention to this as you are out there gathering information, listening to this podcast in itself, because I might be saying things that are not meeting you exactly where you are because I'm not with you right now. I don't get to know how you are receiving this right now. I don't get to adjust what I'm saying for you and your nervous system. And that reigns true for any video you are watching of anybody, right? And so the other thing it can do when we're out there gathering information is it just massively overwhelms our system. It's just so much information out there. And again, it kind of talks to where I was speaking about behavior change or highlighting all these areas that may be focus areas at some point. It leads us to believe, oh my goodness, I have to start eating perfectly and meditating perfectly and exercising perfectly and doing all these things perfectly right now, or else that's it. And again, all that is going to do is overwhelm people. It overwhelms me if I think about it, paralyze you, and then you just don't take action. Most people hear that kind of stuff when you get into that amount of overwhelm and even confusion about what to do next. It just shuts down your system. It sends you into a deep freeze. So if you're recognizing this in yourself, I'm going to invite you in to take this deep breath and like clear it all out. Maybe you're holding on to this thing that you heard that you're like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be doing this. And you can just set it aside right now. Maybe in 3 months, that will be the exact next right step. But right now you can put it aside. Or maybe there's all these amazing things that you've heard, and right now they can all set aside except for this one nugget that you're like, this is what is right for me to focus on next. And coming back to the sink. So the hard part was, I have no idea what it's called, like the drain, right? Where the water goes down the drain and there's that thing that pops up and that can block the water from draining down. That was what was really hard to replace, at least for me. In order to replace it, I had to take out the old one. It will not work to just put in a new drain thingy because that's the technical name for it. And this is where I'm seeing people jump ahead too far of like, oh, I need to put in this new mindset, believe this new thing. And they're trying to put it on top of something that needs to be removed first. That belief, maybe that mindset shift that they desire is a beautiful place to move towards, just like I had the desire to replace my drain thingy. But in order to do it, I first had to step back and take out the old one. I couldn't just jam in the new one. And this is what I'm seeing so much of is this like, I gotta do this thing that I heard. I'm trying to jam it on top of something that needs to be released first, looked at first, addressed first, whatever it might be. Whether it is a nervous system imprint, an old trauma, an old belief, it could be even something more physical, where let's say somebody has the desire to, I want to go be able to squat 150 pounds. Well, first thing, you need to be able to squat your body weight, right? Maybe you need to work on your hip mobility first. Now, let's keep going to my sink, okay? Because I think it works to have something tangible to think about. Is in this very literal example, I had to remove this thing out and it was stuck in there. The instructions were like, just unscrew the thing. I cannot unscrew this. I bought 3 different tools. None of them worked. I even had my husband try because I was like, I'm probably just too weak to get it. Like nothing. And at this point, I am like breaking off plastic pieces. Like I could not get this thing to budge. And as I'm looking at it closer, I'm like, I'm pretty sure this thing is glued on, which is why it is not coming off. All right. But I had to get this thing off no matter what in order to put the new thing on. Now, for the other sink that I did, so after I did my first one, I did the second one, it came off like it was nothing. It just unscrewed off like no problem. And so it was such a great analogy because there are some times where it's so easy to remove the old thing that we just don't even think about it as a step, right? Sometimes we hear a new belief, we hear this new mindset, and it just like so seamlessly becomes a part of ourselves. And it's like this like massive, like, oh my goodness, I just didn't even know I could think that way. And like, bam, like instant transformation. And when that happens, freaking awesome. But other times it is like a freaking 3-day process of buying all this or trying all this different tools and buying new tools and trying new tools of what is going to get this damn thing off, which is where I was with the first sink. But however, I was so clear on the goal of I knew what I needed to get off. I knew what I needed to address. And there can be underlying patterns and beliefs that we can be so clear on, like keep the focus on, here's what needs to be addressed. Maybe it's fear about the pain itself. That often needs to be looked at first before trying many of the mindset things, even nervous system regulation techniques. Sometimes when the fear of pain is one of the strongest components, nervous system regulation techniques feel like they jam up in your system because your system is like, how are you asking me to regulate and calm, quote unquote, calm down when I'm freaking out about this thing? And it can seem counterintuitive. And some people might even teach like, hey, you have to regulate first, then address the fear. I don't find that to be true, at least not all the time. Again, because everything's going to depend on your system. I find for many, we actually have to address the fear first, and then you can regulate because the steps matter. And unlike a bathroom sink, it may look different from person to person. The steps are going to be different from person to person. Now, after I finally got this drain thing out, and this was one of the steps that was overwhelming me, was the fact that you have to make sure the like pipe thing fits you're underneath your sink, and I couldn't measure it until I took the old one out. So I had no idea. And my issue of the overwhelm was you have to cut it to be the right measurement. And I was like, I hate measuring things. That freaks me out. I don't want to cut it wrong. And also I don't have a tool to cut it. And so it finally came time for that step, and I put it in and I was like, I think this is close enough. It like was 2 millimeters longer than the one that was in there. So I'm like, I think we should be good to go. I install it all, I do it all, and it turns out, nope. Definitely that 2 millimeters mattered, so my little P-trap thing wouldn't go back on properly. And I'm like, ugh, I don't want to go to the store, and I don't want to buy a whole saw to cut off this stupid thing. Anyways, the point is I improvised. I used what I had available. Here's this instructions being like, here's exactly how you do it, here's the tool. And it turned out I had like an actual giant saw, to cut a tree in my garage, and so I just used that while it was still attached to my sink because I forgot to mention the fact that I had already puttied this thing in and stuck it in, so I actually couldn't get it back out. Like, did it completely the quote-unquote probably wrong way. I'm sure if a plumber saw me doing this, they would be like, what the fuck are you doing? It was like all uneven and all jacked up, but guess what? It worked. It worked. Sometimes you don't have to follow the instructions properly. Sometimes what you think it needs to look like, you get to do what works for you and the resources you have available and what you have capacity for. And that was what I had capacity for at that time. I was like, I want to just get this thing done. So I am going to jerry-rig the crap out of it. And this was like 3 months ago. I haven't had any issues. So hey, it worked. Yay me. But I bring this in again is let's bring in the tools now aspect, because this was the other piece that was coming up. In these consults, what I was hearing was, hey, I've been using this tool. Mindset was a very common one. It was mindset and nervous system regulation. These were the tools that I kept hearing people reference of, I have been doing these for months, if not years, and I'm not seeing the benefit. And then they're like, and then I watched your talk, and I feel like I've been doing it wrong. And then in the consult, that was kind of what came out, is because I was introducing a different tool, a different perspective first. And what I noticed is that for many people, they shifted into shame or failure of like, oh my gosh, I've been doing it wrong. What's wrong with me? When it's such an interesting place that we go to that so easily, right? Because here's the thing is, never did I imply that at all. There wasn't even a thought in my mind or a judgment in my mind or anything like that. It was, how could they know any better? That was what they were being told. It was what they tried. And it was only because they were trying what they had and had the data of how their system responded that I was able to then give my recommendation, right? Without that information, I wouldn't have been so clear on what piece they were missing. It was because they had all that data, because they had tried all these things. And so then, and this was a conversation I ended up having with one person in particular, she was like, but these tools that I've been using, they sound so good. They sound so right. How can they be so wrong? And it was such an interesting response. And this is, again, not the first time I've heard this. They're not wrong. What she was talking about was like mindset work and visioning and manifestation and like kind of dreaming your future self. And I'm like, nothing is wrong with that. It's beautiful work. It just can't come when drain pipe is still in there, right? So again, it's like trying to jam in a new drain pipe when you haven't removed the old one yet. Once you do the work of removing what needs to be removed, then all the work, this is the conversation I had with her, all the work that she has been doing is going to just drop into place so beautifully and probably pretty rapidly that you'll see such a massive snowball effect. And I can say this has been true for all the clients who I've had who have been already doing a lot of mindset work, a lot of visioning work, a lot of even nervous system regulation work. Is that when we step back into the layer that they need, which is often nervous system safety and addressing certain protective patterns, because they've done all the other work, it then just kind of falls into place. Versus somebody else who's coming in, and again, there's no right or wrong of how you're coming in, who doesn't have that background. It's like we're still stepping back and doing all the work, and then we just get to move into the next step, right? And then the next step, and we might work together a little bit longer just because there's a little bit more like ground to cover in terms of knowledge. And then actually implementing the knowledge, of course. But when I have someone who already almost has the knowledge that they need, like the future steps, often our time together might be much shorter because I'm just bridging the gap that was missing. And then they get to go run off with whatever techniques and whatever tools that they already have that they love and use and whatnot. Because I see a lot of healers, I see a lot of coaches or yogis or, people who have like their own way that they approach things. And honestly, at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong, but there are certain things that you have to address so certain tools will be received by your system. So I'm always working with people on like, why is your system maybe rejecting, and by system I mean your nervous system, rejecting something that you're like, this sounds good, like logically I want this to work, like logically this makes sense, this is all fits, but there's like a rejection, there's an internal resistance or tension to using it. And that might be, maybe your tool is journaling, for example. But when you sit down to journal, you're like, I'm just getting jammed up. I'm just telling the whole story. I'm stuck, or I have a block, or I journal all this out, and then the next day it just feels like I'm starting from scratch again, right? That might be an example of the internal resistance. Or mindset work. Maybe you're trying to believe a new thought, and it is like, you drop in the thought and your brain's like, let me give you 500 reasons why that's not true. And it takes so much effort to try to like reconvince it every time, right? Those are all examples of internal resistance where if you step back and work with the underlying nervous system protective responses, all of a sudden you can just then sit down and journal, or sit down and do mindset work, or sit down and do meditation. Again, whatever your favorite tool is. I have, mine that if somebody's coming in fresh that I teach, but if you already have yours, like use what works. It's always about what works for your system. My job is to help you identify where it's not working, where you're not getting the intended results, where you're like, I should be further along, not from a place of should, but really it's like, no, I've really been putting in the effort and my results aren't matching up to that. And that's really where I help people bridge the gap. And so I say this to be like, if you have a great tool or one that you really love in theory, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Let's be like real dorky here. It's like, here's this amazing wrench that I have, since we're talking about home repairs. It is like the coolest wrench ever, and it's adjustable, and it's easy, and it fits anywhere, and it locks in place, and it has all these cool bells and whistles. It could be the coolest fucking wrench ever. Apparently, I don't know. Can wrenches be cool? Let's go with it, okay? But if you need a screwdriver, you need a screwdriver, right? It doesn't mean like, damn it, here's a screw, and this wrench isn't a screwdriver, so therefore I should just throw out the wrench and I'm a failure for trying to use it, right? Like, no, we would never do that. That would be so silly. And yet we do that with like inner work tools a lot, or other tools, or even things like exercise or nutrition. It's like, I ate more vegetables and it didn't cure my pain. And it's like, well, maybe you just need to eat more vegetables because they're like good for your system in other ways, but doesn't mean they're going to cure your pain, right? It's like wrong tool for wrong intention. And so sometimes it's about matching up the tools, not throwing them out. And sometimes there's bad tools. I will say that too. Sometimes there absolutely are tools that do not work, and you can just get rid of them because there are newer and updated models. But for the most part, I would say that is actually not nearly as common as people just trying to use the wrong tool at the wrong time, or at the wrong point in their journey, or on the wrong thing. So if that's something you need help with, because it can be really tough to see that for yourself. It's obvious when it's a screwdriver, but it's a lot harder when it's inner work, and we're in our own bodies, right? We're so in it that sometimes it's really challenging to have that outside perspective. So if that is something that you want help with, you feel like you're jamming up with, or you feel like you're like, I don't really have a good toolbox in the first place, and like, I definitely don't even know half of what Andrea's talking about here, then let's build up your toolbox in the first place. Let's figure out what it is for you. Is it an adjustment of what you already have, or is it a building up of something? Or is it a stepping back, building a bridge to get you then to what you already have, right? Whatever it is, can you allow yourself to receive support on the journey? Because nervous system work was never intended to be done by yourself. Part of nervous system work is always going to be about connection and a container and relationship, because our nervous systems are social beings. We are social beings, and the right container, the right relationship can accelerate healing like no other. That is something that gets brought up in my group program. Swear it's like almost every week, of people just acknowledging the amazingness of the container itself, of the safety it provides, of the healing, of the validation, and of the like forward movement together that the group makes. It is such a powerful, powerful tool, an underused tool for healing, is like a high quality community. And that is what the Pain to Power group provides. And so whether you're looking for group support or one-to-one support, definitely reach out. Book one of those exact calls that I was offering out to those on the summit to really brainstorm what's working, what's not, and what is your next best step forward, whether it is a container with me or something else entirely. There was many people where I was not recommending the container. It's like I was giving a specific tool or book or recommendation or resource. And if I felt it was a great fit and something that was going to absolutely move someone towards their goal, then working together was absolutely something I'd recommend. It's always going to be individualized. I am not about one size fits all solutions, because that's ridiculous when it comes to the body. So whatever it may be, most important thing is that you are allowing yourself to receive support. Give yourself the gift of receiving support, even if it is just in what is the next step for you. So if that feels right for you, go ahead and book a call. I will say, you may find that it is tough to get in the month of December. I am taking time off to be with my family, so just book for January if you can't find a slot in December, and give yourself that gift anyways. Don't let urgency get in the way of like, oh, I can't get a spot right now. Allow yourself to have that pause, that breath, that reflection time, and then we'll meet in January if that is what is available, depending on when you are hearing this and when you are looking for a spot. And I am so looking forward to connecting. I also will say, if you have had any desire to connect and book a call like this, definitely take advantage now. I may not leave these spots open for very long. It might be something where I'm really, after having an influx of them, that I am likely going to then pause consults and have them offered a lot more sparingly. So take advantage now, because I am feeling the fire and I've been loving connecting with people, and I want to continue on for just a little bit more. So I look forward to getting to learn more about you and help you move forward so you can get out and live your best life. See you then.